Tuesday here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We're joined by Jim Wexell, one of the guys that I've been telling y'all, he knows all about the Steelers. He's been covering them for a long time. I want to get Jim's perspective on this front office and the big swings that it's been taking, because a lot of people are saying a lot of this is unprecedented, but is it? We'll explore that here and more on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. More on Game Time and the great tickets you can get there. We've got a special guest. He's been on the show a few times before. His name is Jim Wexell. Jim has been covering the Steelers for many years. We love getting his insight here. You can find a lot of his written work. He's an author. I have one of his books right here on the clock, behind the scenes of the Pittsburgh Steelers at the NFL draft. He has also written a great book, Polomalu, Steeler Nation. All that can be found at jimwexell.com. Also his written work on the Steelers day-to-day at pit.scout.com. Jim, thanks so much for joining us here today. How's the offseason treating you, sir?
Oh, it's busy. Get back from the combine, rush around, do some errands, go to some funerals, and now you cover a new quarterback every day. So
every day, Jim, every day. That's like Jim and I we're bouncing around a little bit. Talking to all the podiums. Jim and I were one of the few people that we're waiting for Zach Frazier, the last guy to talk at the combine, waiting for that center from West Virginia to show up. So Jim and I, we were palling around in Indianapolis. But let's talk about, this front office right now, Jim, because I'm 34 years old. I've been watching the Steelers for most of my life. I've been covering them since 2016 is like when I started really covering them as a job. I've been kind of writing them as a blogger since 2013. And for me, seeing these big types of swings, trading for Justin Fields, trading away Deontay Johnson, all the changes, Kenny Pickett being traded away, trading Justin Fields into the organization, signing a Russell Wilson type of quarterback while trading away Deontay Johnson and signing Patrick Lee. This to me was like the craziest week of free agency that I can remember physically experiencing as a person who's had to cover it and work it, because I kept having to cover and work it. But Jim, is this Omar Khan, Andy Weidel front office, is this unique, unprecedented? Do you feel like they are opening a brand new chapter that's never seen before? Or is this just because they don't have the franchise quarterback and this is what happens?
There you go. You took my answer. I mean, it was 18 years with Ben Roethlisberger. Also, packed cap. I mean, they really didn't have much money when you have a franchise quarterback. Omar does different things, and he's a shrewd phone dealer. But these are Mike Tomlin's moves. I mean, let's not get carried away with, Omar didn't call him and say, hey, I just got you Justin Fields and Russell Wilson. And Mike Tomlin's, oh, that sounds good. Okay, we'll work them out. That's not how it works, especially with Tomlin and a new GM. So if you look at all the periods of time when Pittsburgh didn't have a franchise quarterback, they made moves similar to this. I mean, look at Kevin Colbert signed Kent Graham his first year, brought in Tommy Maddox. I know that was a minor move, but they had a second-round pick, Cordell Stewart. They gave him his time, and then they drafted Roethlisberger, and then Colbert could just, not worry about quarterback again. And that's the main problem. In the 80s, they had Mark Malone was a first-round pick in 1980. And they didn't know Bradshaw's arm was shot. They didn't know he underwent surgery. He didn't tell them. And then they passed on Marino. And then he showed up and couldn't throw. And then in 84, they traded a third for David Woodley. That's more than they've traded for Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. '88, they traded a 4th-round pick for Todd Blackledge. So the scramble for quarterbacks, and you can go back before in the '60s and the '50s as well. They brought 34-year-old quarterbacks in for 2 number 1 picks. And Ed Brown. I mean, so bringing in a 35-year-old quarterback for minimum wage, you know, it's your grandfather's Steelers. Not your father's, because your father's Steelers are all Ben Roethlisberger.
I love that phrase. It's your great, because everyone's saying these aren't your father's Steelers anymore, and you're right, because Jim, like you said, when you have the franchise quarterback, a lot of your money's tied up in that. So you can only do so many things to be aggressive, because not only do you have him, you got guys protecting him. Like when they for years they had Marquise Pouncey tied up in big money, Dave DeCastro tied up in big money, and you kept those guys because they protected Ben Roethlisberger. And then you wanted to get super talents like Antonio Brown that you had to pay. So like there's a lot of money that gets tied up in things like that. And it kind of leads to like, hey, you can't be as aggressive, you know, in free agency. And we've seen that for years. And now it's come the time to be a little bit more aggressive. And it seems like the Steelers are doing that. I do think it's interesting though, Jim, the patience the Steelers have exhibited to get some of the trade value that they've gotten. You know, I want to get your feeling, like even going back to the Chase Claypool trade to get that 2nd round pick from the Bears, to getting Justin Fields for a 6th that's a 6th that can be conditional to a 4th, but it's probably going to be a 6th if Russell Wilson does start the whole year this year. Like, what have you seen from Omar Khan in this front office to be able to make some of the moves that require messing with other teams?
Well, for one thing, the Chase Claypool trade was made in season when the player is more valuable than the draft pick. Right now, before the draft pick is more valuable than the player. So it depends on your timing. And, you know, Kenny Pickett didn't get much in return. If you add up the draft value board points, 2 7ths and a trade up of 22 spots, which just became 23 spots today with the move of San Francisco down to the bottom. I think I'm just guessing. I didn't look at it, but that was a mid 4th round pick. So they got a mid 4th round pick for a guy who's been a starter for 2 years. He's going to be a decent backup for him, I think. So, yeah, they didn't get that much, but a mid 4th rounder, I'm satisfied. They didn't have to give much for Fields because of his contract status. Now that's going to be a difficult decision. I thought it would be more difficult when I realized they're not going to pick up that option by May 2nd. They don't really know what they have. You can wait and find out and watch them play and coach them and watch them in some preseason. Before the regular season, you're still taking a risk if you extend the contract and give him some kind of moderate deal. Or maybe he won't want a moderate deal. Maybe he'll want to explore free agency. So there's all kind of question marks with that acquisition. So, you know, you would think you got a guy like that's going to take Russell Wilson's job after Russ. You're not going to get minimum wage on a 9-time Pro Bowl quarterback. No. Some of these things are fortuitous for Omar. And also the patience, though. He did show a lot of patience, just like he did last draft. You know, they waited. Those tackles, they needed a tackle, and those tackles were going off the board. And so what did he trade? A 4th round pick?
They traded a 4th round pick that they got back anyways.
Yeah. Well, and that was through patience too, because they were going to take Darnell Washington in the 3rd round early. And they said, nah, let's trade down. They trade down. Darnell Washington is still available. So the patience paid off again. And then they get Herbig in the 4th round. So his patience and his unwillingness to jump like a young GM, I would think would. You know, he's shrewd. Those are big pluses. But I'm not going to get carried away and say that he and Weidl are behind all these moves. Now, if Toma walks in and looks at the draft board and says, move this guy up, they move him up. Okay. This isn't Andy Weidl's draft board. It's Mike Tomlin's. He trusts and they confer. And, you know, I think Omar brought the right guy in, a personnel man, to help him as a GM. But, man, he's really proving to be a shrewd dealer. And look how patient he was with Fields. Philadelphia wanted Fields. They were one of 5 teams at the start of free agency. The Bears were looking for a 2nd, a 4th, and a 6th.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wanted to pay that much, so they started buying their free agents in free agency, right? And so 3 teams were eliminated, and now there was the Eagles left and the Steelers in the Fields pool.
Yeah.
And the Eagles made an offer, and the Bears said no. They held out. The Bears were trying to be patient, and so the Eagles looked at the Steelers. How about your guy? So the Steelers became the only team left in the pool for Fields by giving Philadelphia a quarterback.
That's crazy.
Pretty cool. Yeah. So the patience really paid off, whereas the Bears were trying to be patient and blew it. So they only get a 6th round pick, unless, of course, he plays 51% of the snaps, and it's a 4th round pick.
Right. And as long as we understand it, Russell Wilson is slotted to be get the first shot at QB1. So presumably, unless he gets hurt or Justin Fields is just that amazing, they're going to he's not going to play 51% of the snaps. And hey, if he is that amazing, I think that's worth a 4th round pick. Again, next year, not even this year, next year. So I think that puts them in an interesting situation. But I want to talk more about these quarterbacks with you, Jim, because there's a lot of excitement about something new on the Steelers quarterback front. But I want to talk about, is that excitement for, placed in a good place for hoping for good things, or should people be a little bit more cautious? That and more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Jim Wexell, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the app you can download right to your phone to get tickets without it being a stressful process. Game Time is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all your sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. You get killer deals on last-minute tickets, and they have a best price guarantee that can't be beat. Just download the Game Time app, and when you go in there, you'll see the amazing prices they give you, and you can see the view from the seat that you're trying to book, so that you know you're not getting scammed with the great price that you're seeing. And also, these are exclusive flash deals for football games, basketball games, baseball games, hockey games, concerts, comedy, theater events. Game Time has so many different options. And again, their best price guarantee promises that if you find tickets to the same event in the same section and row for less somewhere else, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference of those prices. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase, or go to their website, gametime.co. Terms and conditions apply. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm Chris Carter here with Jim Wexell. Jim, let's talk about this new quarterback situation. We talked a little bit about getting a Russell Wilson, getting a Justin Fields, and there's understandable excitement about getting a guy who threw 26 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, as a 9-time Pro Bowler, as a Super Bowl champion in Russell Wilson, and a guy like Justin Fields who he's really fast. He's run for over 1,000 yards in a season. He has a strong arm. He brings a different set of tools than Kenny Pickett, and there's reasonable excitement about either one of these guys, either working now or in the future. But do you feel like there's already a little bit too much excitement, too much hope that these guys are going to be just plug and play and be all that, or should people be a little bit more cautious?
No, people should be excited. It's an interesting time, interesting moves, and the Steelers didn't do it just the old Daniel Snyder recipe for selling tickets. No, they're going to sell tickets, which I don't think they need to, but they're going to sell tickets because it's exciting. These are interesting players. It'll be exciting to see what Arthur Smith does with Fields as Cordell Slash type. I mean, I don't think he'll be playing wide receiver or running back, but I'm sure he'll come in for packages like that and run the ball. He really reminds me of Cordell Stewart. So I don't know if that's good for long term. I don't know. I don't know that he'll ever be a defense reader. I don't know if he'll ever be able to beat zones, but he can do all the, he can heave it against man coverage and he can run the ball. So it's funny. Mike Mularkey used to call the offense in 2001 exotic smash mouth. And it was very interesting, especially when he got Randall L. and Hines Ward was doing a lot of funny stuff, and Cordell, and they did a lot of trick gadget running plays. And I like that term. And then, Malarkey bred, for lack of a better word, Arthur Smith at Tennessee. And Arthur Smith's a tight ends coach. He followed Malarkey and Wisenhunt there. And it's kind of an exotic smash mouth approach he's taking too. So I think the backup quarterback will fit into that scheme in some way. And that'll be interesting to see that.
It's funny you bring up Mike Mularkey. As a kid, like Mike Mularkey, I think he became the offensive coordinator in like 2000. So that I would have been like 10 years old. And I remember that was like the first name I was like, offensive coordinator. He calls the plays. What? But I just remember thinking like that play was so cool. That's when you had Cordell Stewart and Hines Ward, and they would set up double passes and everything. I was thinking like, man, this is really cool. This is innovative. This is different. And I'm a 10-year-old. I don't know nothing, but like you see that kind of stuff. And that's kind of interesting for me because with the tools that you have, like you said, like certainly there's limitations that both quarterbacks are going to have, just like every quarterback has. But I think good offensive coordinators find ways to hit the strengths that they provide. Again, Arthur Smith turned Ryan Tannehill into a Pro Bowl quarterback. The two best years of Derrick Henry's career, average-wise, yards-wise, are under Arthur Smith's leadership at offensive coordinator. And I think for Arthur Smith, his goal is it's not just to highlight the quarterback because this offense is going to be about more than just that. This offense is going to want to pound you with an offensive line that they still need to invest in, by the way. It's about using your duo running backs of Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. It's about getting the ball to your playmakers in smart situations. And arguably, they're not done adding to the group of playmakers at wide receiver with trading away Deontay Johnson, either in free agency or maybe even the draft. But point being, I think that there's a chance that for the excitement that we're talking about here being about fitting this new form of offense that we have not seen in Pittsburgh since 20 plus years ago because you had Ben Roethlisberger on the team.
Well, Russell Wilson can play a little quarterback too. So I'm excited just to see him, even if they don't do packages like that involve Fields, but they will. And I think the other thing that goes with Russell Wilson, it's not going to only excite the fan base. It seems to be exciting and attracting free agents. It's exciting the team. Mm-hmm. The defensive leaders were all on the call with Russell Wilson. It was like a total recruiting blitz, like an old school college recruiting blitz. Especially you can't give the guy any more money. So the money is not talking to Russell Wilson. TJ Watt and Minka and Cam are talking to him while they're interrupting Mike Tomlin on what was supposed to be a 10-minute Zoom call was a 90-minute Zoom call. And, Tomlin was selling. And now Tomlin's selling Russell Wilson to Patrick Queen. Boom, he signs. And that I just have a feeling Mike Williams is going to sign because of Russell Wilson and the excitement that's building. And they got Van Jefferson. That's a nice third receiver. If he's going to be he's not a bad second receiver. And so I'm hoping they don't have to draft a wide receiver. I know they draft them well, but stop draft. If you draft them so well, why do you draft one every year then? Let's get satisfied and find some people you like and stick with them and draft your linemen. They need a center. They need a number 3 tackle at the minimum. You want to start Dan Moore. That's a coaching staff decision. He's now entering his fourth year?
Fourth year.
Yeah. So they're not going to give up on that cheap contract for a left tackle right now. And so you at least need a number 3 because Chooks gone. So you need a number 3. So you need a tackle and a center. And I think a defensive tackle too, and a cornerback. Ooh. I mean, I don't know. Why do you want to sacrifice one of those 4 key positions for a wide receiver and, linebacker? They don't need a linebacker either. But
true, they've addressed that. But to your point, wide receiver with George Pickens on the roster, like George Pickens looks like he could be the number 1 wide receiver. Mm-hmm. His contract will be up after next season, and that gives you time to figure out what kind of deal you want to work out with him, and then you can build around that with other guys. You still have Calvin Austin who could develop, and you could also pick a receiver in the later rounds this year. Like you could get different guys that kind of supplement the passing attack there. But also don't forget with Pat Freiermuth, he's not officially a wide receiver, but in Arthur Smith's offense, you could use him more. You can find better ways to include him that Matt Canada's offense didn't do enough of. So that might alleviate the need for having to be able to for having to need to get 3 wide receivers that could just go get the ball at any point in time. That's where I see, I do agree with you. Like there's other needs. If they could hit on Joey Porter's partner for the next 8 to 10 years at cornerback early on, like if like Terrion Arnold just falls to them at 20, well, shucks, that's a heck of a get there. But like, one of those tackles, like tackle or corner. And even center too. Any 3 of those positions in the first round, and then even in the second round, you're looking at guys that can fill primary needs right now, and maybe solidify your roster in places that you saw as weaknesses even in last season.
Let me not forget to include quarterback as a wild card early draft pick. I mean, they've got to love somebody. Not that there's nobody I love. I like Bo Nix. I don't love Bo Nix at 20. Who's the other guy? Spencer Rattler in the second round.
Michael Penix.
Michael Penix. Now, if he's a first rounder, I don't want him. But I know a scout that just loves him. A Steeler scout that loves him. And then I watched him play Michigan, and he didn't look like an NFL quarterback. It looked, because Michigan's got an NFL defense, right? So you can gauge a little better, and you watch him, and you're like, nah, not first round, no way. So if you love him, I know a guy that loves him. I don't know how much say he's going to have, but that's a professional opinion. And so Michael Penix could be a second round guy, but you'd hate to see that. But still, look how lucky they had to get the quarterbacks they have now. And it might be only for 1 year, both of them.
Yeah.
So quarterback is a difficult position to fill. And man, you can't stop looking for them when you don't have one.
Agreed. And here's the thing is that all you have to do is hit once at quarterback. You hit one time, you could be good for the next 10, 15 years. And I mean, look at Ben Roethlisberger.
Right.
And like you said, at the time, the Steelers were trying to figure that out so badly. They had Cordell, and they had the Kent Graham, Mike Tom's, like they went and got Tommy Maddox for a bit out of the XFL. And then they were like, they drafted Ben Roethlisberger, and everyone was just hoping, please, could he be the one that finally ends the carousel of quarterbacks? And then he did for almost 2 whole decades. But now you're back here and you're trying to figure that out. That's what the Steelers are hoping for, that maybe Russell Wilson can at least be a bridge. Maybe Justin Fields will either be an answer or an extended bridge to buy them more time to find that guy while staying competitive with the roster that they have together. But I want to talk about the side of the ball that has been winning the most of the games of late for the Steelers, and that's the defense. Can this defense reach elite status this next year? I want to talk about that with Jim on the other side of this next break here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. But first, I want to remind you this show is also brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you could still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to the IRA with a 3% match. The offer is good through April 30th. Get started with Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal information. Claim was of Q1 of 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Jim Wexell, esteemed Steelers author. He's covered the team for so many years. We lean on his experience here. And Jim, let's talk about this defense with the way it's currently constructed. You got TJ Watt, you got Alex Highsmith, Joey Porter's coming off a really good rookie year. They added DeShaun Elliott at safety, and they've added Patrick Queen at linebacker. Cam Hayward's coming back, at his age. Keanu Benton's getting to step up. Do you see a core here that can make an elite defense? And if so, What's the biggest addition you think is needed to get it to that point?
A tackle and a center. Keep them off the field. Keep them off the field more than they were last year. Because look how good they were last year, and they had to scratch and claw. They were out there a while, and they bent but didn't break. I mean, they weren't as good at yielding yardage as they were points. I mean, they were better as a scoring defense than a yardage defense. And look, they've got the depth now. They know they have a backup outside linebacker. I'd love to see him get Golden back, Marcus Golden. I don't know where that stands or if he's even trying to get a job somewhere else. They need a corner. They need a nickel. I don't know where Dante Jackson's going to play, probably outside corner. So it would be nice to see them if they can't get like you. What's the kid from Alabama's name again? Terrion
Arnold.
Yeah. I mean, he strikes me as a top 10 guy, but I've been seeing, Mitchell going in the top 10 as the first corner in these mock drafts lately, and Terrion Arnold falling to the Steelers. Now, I would have no qualms taking him or Mitchell. I love Mitchell. But if you can't do that, you get an elite corner in the first round, you can get an elite nickel back in like the third round. You know what I mean?
Like a Mike Sanders still out of Michigan?
Something like that. Exactly. A Mike Hilton type, but maybe with a little more speed. I mean, Mike didn't time well coming out, but he turned into a great player. A great nickelback, and they've missed that. They haven't had that since, and I assume they're going to go looking for it. So that's the kind of guy you can get in the third round. So they need that. They needed a strong safety, and DeShaun Elliott, man, the highlights I'm seeing, he looks like the guy. I mean, when he lit up Derrick Henry, I tried to get him to talk about that at the press conference. He gave me this, the poop eating grin, like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Hey, I don't speak bad of Derrick Henry because he might run me over someday.
Well, I don't think he has that attitude. He was just better to keep it reserved. Mike Tomlin, he laughed about it. He goes, after the conference, he goes, Wex trying to get that question in there. I said, what's that? He goes, trying to get him to talk dirt on Derrick Henry. I said, well, he didn't. And he goes, you should have asked him directly. It's like Mike wanted me to ask. You should have asked him directly. I said, well, I gave him an open question. Like I asked him if he ever does he have a history with Derrick Henry? Because they were talking about the Ravens, right? Playing against the Ravens. And speaking of the Ravens, Derrick Henry just signed with them. And so I thought he might talk about that hit that's flying around the internet, that forced fumble on Derrick Henry. And that's the kind of player DeShaun Elliott is. He plays like Casey, except he's a couple inches bigger and 20, 30 pounds heavier. So he's going to be more durable than Casey. And as someone told me, Casey might not be allowed to be Casey anymore by the league. They like to make examples of people, and
they do.
He could be their poster child next year. I mean, they started that 4-game suspension was pretty harsh.
Yeah. I mean, and you go back to that Colts game and that hit and everything, and they were like, yeah, there's a clear message sent there. But I want to ask you more about DeShaun Elliott. One thing I said when they signed him, I said, if this works out the way that I think it could, he could be the strong safety that lets Minkah Fitzpatrick go back to being the center fielding free safety. And not that he can't move around the field, because he should. He's a very talented athlete. But I felt like there were too many times Minkah Fitzpatrick had to be like the extra dime linebacker and try to help against the run a lot more, because they just didn't have the personnel to do that consistently. And with the addition of Queen, with the addition of Elliott, guys who can play in those roles and be bigger hitters against the run, do you think that will let Minkah Fitzpatrick kind of get back to that? Last year, he didn't have any interceptions, and that's a big part of what I think can make this defense be elite.
I do agree that Minkah's a better ball hawk than strong safety, but he can be an excellent strong safety. Cover tight ends, play in the box, cover wide receivers, cover slot receivers. You can do all that. Just like Troy, this franchise, when they go to a Super Bowl, they have a great strong safety. The free safeties are okay, and look what Ed Reed did. Ball hawks can be big factors. So what I'm trying to say is the position is more important at strong safety, it seems. You just have to be a more jack of all trades. So I don't know that they're going to entirely rule that out for Minkah because, Patrick Queen, he's 4.5 speed, really fast, great blitzer, but his coverage skills, his grades as a cover guy have all been average.
Meh. Yeah.
Even, the passer rating he allowed is bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's like 94. So, if there's a really good tight end on the other team, Minkah's going to have to get those kind of assignments still. But the hope is, as you say, and I think that was the hope with Keanu Neal, but he just wasn't that good. And then he got hurt.
Yeah.
That Minkah can be more of a ball hawk back there and get more interceptions. Yeah.
To your point earlier about possessing the football, the Steelers went from at the point of November 1st to they were ranked dead last in time of possession. They finished the season 20th. And I think that you can see the change as when Broderick Jones became a starter and the offensive line started blocking better and the run game started taking over and things started to click for them. And that allowed the defense to get more rest. That's a big part of it. But also a big part of it is making sure that your defense is more of a complete roster and has answers across the board. Like you said, slot corner still in need. Maybe a young defensive lineman to add in there with Keanu Benton. Outside corner still, even with Dante Jackson, wouldn't hurt to have another star out there like a Quinion Mitchell or Terry Onano if they were to fall there. There's all these different options, but I still think the defense is in a really good spot, Jim, with the leaders that they have around it and the young talent that they have on it, that it could only maybe take one or two more things to add to it, and it can be an elite group next year if the offense isn't forcing them to live on the field every day.
Well, the one other factor is Cam Hayward has to regain what he had before the injury. And I'm not saying he was bad, and I'm expecting him to improve with health, but he was struggling. He was playing hurt last year. So he has to regain the old Cam magic, which I think he can, even at his age. And they have to stay healthy, of course. So, Landon Roberts is a good buck linebacker in the old sense. And Patrick Queen runs a 4.5, so he's the blitzing Mac that Tomlin has always wanted with Lawrence Timmons. Mm-hmm. They don't even call him Buck and Mac anymore, but these two guys define Buck and Mac. They're the stereotypes of those positions. If you ever get lost on which one's the Buck and which one's the Mac, Levon Kirkland was a Buck.
Yes.
300 pounds. That's all you need to know. They're
coming downhill.
But he could cover too when he was less than 300. But I'm excited. Why not? Why not be excited? I think the hype is warranted.
I feel you on that. He's Jim Wexell, amazing Steelers author, amazing Steelers writer that's been covering the team for a long time. Jim, let people know they can find you, follow you, and get more of your work.
Steel City Insider. We have a subscription site, Steel City Insider. It's a CBS Sports, and JimWexell.com for my books.
This one right here. It's a great book. Check it out.
I just wrote it. I just finished another one the other day. You asked me what I've been doing. I've been doing a lot of stuff. The last 2 days, it's weird. You go from all this stuff going on, and please, Steelers, don't sign another quarterback today. I got a deadline here. And then all of a sudden, nothing. 2 days, it's like total emotional flat spot for me. It's like everything. I feel lazy. I'm just going to the gym and coming home and eating.
It's quiet. Too quiet. Jim, thank you so much for joining us here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. He's Jim Wexell. I'm Chris Carter. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com. Find me here every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting app and on YouTube on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We're back again tomorrow talking your Pittsburgh Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.